province, new background. That's Nicolas Cage as a badger. Today I will be reviewing a series of unfortunate events, The Bad Beginning. Now basically this entire series is my childhood, but I'm just gonna see how the first book holds up as, you know, a debut to this series. So the first time I read this book I must have been like 8 or 9, so yeah, 10 years ago was the first time I read this series. And it's still great. There's stuff I pick out of it now that I just didn't get as a younger child, so there's something in it for people of all ages, I think. There's some jokes that you can only get if you're a little bit older, and there's some really scary things that you only pick up on when you're older too. This book follows Violet Klaus and Sunny Baudelaire, the Baudelaire siblings. Their parents die in a fire one day, and then they're just whisked around to different relatives that are all very kind of interesting in their own way. Now they were very well off before they became orphans, and they at first went to a man named Count Olaf, who is actually very evil and is trying to steal their fortune throughout the series. So this first book is actually when they're first introduced to Count Olaf when they're living with him, and how they get out of that situation. This book holds up really well nowadays, not only as a book for somebody my age, but as a children's book, it is outstanding. This book doesn't patronize children at all. It's really amazing with the child's point of view. The way the Baudelaire children talk and react to things is absolutely their ages, and the way that the children interact with the adults in their life is just like I am back in that age again. The adults don't understand anything they're saying, and it's really frustrating because they're trying to get their point across, but they're just seen as children. Reading this book, it was like I vividly understood what it was to be 10 years old again. I also love how he'd always use the really big words and then explain them after, because as a little kid that made me feel super smart because I knew all these words that nobody else did. Except, you know, there's always that thing about when you're reading new words and yeah. They'd be like, wow, Maddie, it's so cool being at your house for the first time. I don't know, I mean, it is pretty austere. Do you mean austere? No, I do not! I mean austere! Do you even read? This is why you have no friends. And it's funny because whenever an adult in this book uses a big word, the Baudelaire orphans are just like, yeah, we know what that word means, God. And it's like the adults in the book are trying to patronize the children, just like adults in real life try to patronize the children, but Lemony Snicket is having none of that. Aside from all of his fantastic understandings of the world, Lemony Snicket is hilarious in his writing and in his writing style. The writing is kind of weird and edgy, but there are jokes in it that'll completely catch you off guard and you'll just laugh out loud. The characters in this book are so memorable. Not only do they have unique personalities, but they'll have unique traits to them so that you notice them and recognize them from the instant they appear. And then whenever they appear again later on, you automatically know where they're from. You'll never forget a character in this book. The people are not only characterized by the things they like and the way they act, but also tiny characteristics about them, like Mr. Poe always having a cough. Also, the way he describes the villains in this book is amazing. I mean, it's not just like he was scary because he was tall and had dark hair. It's like skinny with hooks for hands, or like giant and fat, you couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman, or like they completely covered their faces in white powder. I could probably name for you all of Count Olaf's assistants right now just because of how memorable they are. And Count Olaf as a villain was even scarier now than he was 10 years ago when I was 8, okay? I mean, 8-year-old me was like, yeah, whatever, that's scary, I guess. And 18-year-old me was like, not only does he have the unibrow and the tattoo of the eye on his ankle, but the way he acts is just so slimy. I feel like really uncomfortable every time he speaks. This would be the point where some parents could be like, but Maddie, isn't that too scary for my precious little gumdrop? In which case I go, no, children need this kind of stuff in their lives, man. This is how I learned everything I know to this day. Especially if you're reading this book for the first time. You're really rooting for the Baudelaire orphans to get out of their situation somehow. And you still kind of have hope for the adults. You know, there's Justice Strauss, there's Mr. Poe. Maybe if they kind of got in better contact, or if they could just communicate with them properly, they could get out of their horrible situation. And at this point, you're still kind of relying on the adults. But by the end, it's very clear that the orphans have no one to rely on but themselves, and their intelligence gets them out of situations so perfectly. Their little trait things are so cool. When I was a kid, I wanted to be just like all of them. Violet's inventing thing where she ties her hair out of her eyes and using only the meager supplies around her can create something to rescue her sister from the top of a tower. That is so cool. Or Klaus reading things and just understanding them so much. He's reading the kind of books that I wouldn't want to read now. Like books on law. No thanks. I can't even read my biology textbooks. And Sunny's thing is biting things, but she's just a baby and that's cool. I mean, it's really cute. And the way she acts is really funny. So of course the children's character development in this book is kind of short. It's a shortish book. It's only like 140 pages of kind of big print. So in this book they don't develop as much as maybe later on, but throughout the series I remember them developing a lot more, and I'm really looking forward to reading the rest of this series now. You were on the edge of your seat a lot through this book. There are lots of tense moments. Every chapter kind of ends with a little bit of a, what's gonna happen next? Especially for a book that's kind of twisted in an off tone. I think the orphans' reaction to their parents' death is pretty realistic. I mean, they are in shock, they cry for a long time, but the things that they have to deal with from that point on just kind of put it from their minds, because they are running from the moment their parents die to the end of this book, to the end of the series. They are running for their lives, trying to defend themselves, using only their cleverness to get out of things. And they experience so many horrible things. I don't know how a person in real life would deal with this. I'm so glad that this is not me. So yeah, read this book, no matter what age you are. I'd recommend giving it to your younger cousins. I'd also recommend you start it now, Al, because this is the first book I've reviewed that I know that you haven't read, so do it. If you like this book, I can't really think of any super similar books. For some reason, The Invention of Hugo Cabret by Brian Selznick kind of reminds me of this book, just similar, like, child in a bad situation trying to overcome the outside world with kind of a twisted sort of thing going on. It's not too similar, but I mean, I think you'll like it anyway. If you're older, it's another children's book that's really fantastic. Ow, look, I organized my bookshelves. My room has a floor. Floor.